people are generally people are predisposed to adopt the values that they are raised with. People also tend to believe that those values are right because they are in values of their particular culture. And then the definition of beliefs that I'm just gonna briefly talk about here is that any deep belief that is fundamental to a person's interactions in the world or their sense of self is a core belief. So core beliefs can be positive, negative, or neutral. Some examples are about goodness, a person's belief that they are good or bad, or that other people are mostly good or bad. Beliefs are likability, beliefs such as I am lovable, I am likable. On this slide, I'm going to spend some more time on values and beliefs because we'll go into some specific ethical principles in the future in the next slides. So when we're talking about beliefs, that is when we're talking about good beliefs, that would be like, hopefully everybody on this phone call believes that murder is wrong, right? That's a good belief. We believe that murder is wrong. We might believe that love is good. We might think one of our beliefs is that we want to help people in need. Another one is you shouldn't maybe lie. It can be as simple as one of my belief systems is to brush my teeth throughout the day. Be nice. Getting better. Giving is better than receiving. Stealing is bad. Those are all some good beliefs that we could have. But then, in addition to those beliefs, we probably have some core beliefs that we have that might not be so good or might not be so helpful. And those could be, I'll never get better. I'll never stop worrying. I'm not a confident person. I can't perform like other people. I'll be anxious for the rest of my life. So those are different kinds of beliefs that we could all have. Some of the values that really connect into the ethics portion of this could be we value fitness. We value being a professional. We value relationships. We value our finances. Some of the core values maybe could be that we value family, honesty, loyalty. We value having a higher IQ, adventure, teamwork, all those different things can sit underneath the value brand. So an example of a value could be like, you may believe that contributing something new and different would be what makes you your mark on this world. So that's what that would look like in action. The value that corresponds with that belief might be creativity. Then you may believe that friendship and connections are more than anything else. That underlining value could possibly be loyalty. So those are the differences between ethics, values, and beliefs. And so maybe if we can keep those straight as we move forward, that might be really helpful. So now let's go ahead and dig a little deeper here. So the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So I'm going to begin doing, but I also have to talk. So that's kind of doesn't work real well for me today, but let's go ahead and start learning so we can do better. So why do we need to study ethics? So ethics are involved in everything we do. And it helps us, once we learn what ethics are and why we do them and some of the principles, it really helps us understand why choices have been made against others. And it can help us choose right from wrong. So, but who decides what's right and wrong? So law and ethics and law. So law is the law. So that's who decides what is right and wrong in our professions, right? The ethics of society really should influence the laws that society makes, but ethics over time should change the laws. So, however, the law is always the law, no matter what your ethical beliefs are, and they have to be followed when we're in the helping profession. And always is a really strong word, so I don't want everybody to get hung up on that always. But the law is there to protect you. The law is there to protect your company, and the law most definitely should be there and is there to protect your clients. So who influences ethics? So remember back here when I said that ethics over time should change the law and that the ethics of society should influence the laws. So who influences ethics? So look at this. This is every area that affects ethics. So your family, your friends, community and society, religion, spirituality, role models, workplace, professional bodies, code of conduct, politics, laws, and ourselves. So when I was talking about licensed professionals, they actually have, in order for them to be a profession, they have to have a professional code of ethics that their professionals have to follow, or they couldn't be a licensable profession. So that's what I mean by professional bodies or code of ethics. But in addition to that, you have 6, 7, 8 other areas of who can influence ethics. So that is why we all need to come together to kind of come on some page where we can move forward and work within a culture, create a culture with good ethics. So when we look at how many people are on this, so right now it looks like there are 69 people on this. 69 of us have come from different family origins. So if you look at everything that has influenced you coming from the family that you're coming from, you can see that we all might have different ethics because we're all going to have different beliefs and we're all going to have different values, right? Then we grow up and we have friends, and as adults we have friends, and those friends can influence ethics as well. And then the same depending upon the community you work in the society you work in, religions, each of them contribute to influencing ethics and how that rolls out. And that's why we have to go back to law, we have to go back to policies, and we have to go back to procedures so that we can look at all these different things that influence ethics and come up with a clear path of how we want to move forward so that we can create a culture within our organizations that is an ethical organization. An example, I'll just choose up family. If we look at family, when we're going to go through these principles, I want you to think back of what I've said just about family and friends, especially. So if I've come from a family, I work with you. I'm one of the 70 people that work within your organizations. And in my family growing up, I'm just going to make this up, but in my family growing up, it was totally appropriate to steal if it meant that it could benefit my family but not hurt somebody else. Okay, so if I was working in an office and we needed more ink pens at home, it was okay and it wasn't bad for me to steal those ink pens and bring them home. Or if we were out of food and we needed food, it was okay to have my children or to have me as a young child steal that food because we needed it at home and the store didn't need it as much as we needed it. So you can see how if I would have been raised in a family like that, when I'm all together here with all 70 of you and we're working together, I might have a total different belief and value system. I'm still good. I still feel I'm a good person. You still feel I'm a good person. Above all, we all do great work working with our clients. But one of my core beliefs is that if it's not hurting anybody else, I can do those things. So if I would carry that into work, that could really cause some problems when I'm working with clients, when I'm working with organizations, or when I'm working with my peers. And so that would be just an example of who is influencing my ethics. And I could choose every one of these blue circles and come up with how I have been impacted with ethics by the influence of all those things on those blue parts, all those blue squares. Um, what I want you to do is I want you to, when you're working, I want you to, it's just a term, but I want you to look at your situations and how you deal with things by looking through an ethical lens. So every day, that first one on the left there says, every day we are faced with making decisions. Every day you have, there's a decision to wake up every morning, from the decision to wake up. That's your decision. You're making it. From brushing your teeth to getting dressed to being to work on time, the work you're going to get done in a day. Everything we do is a decision. But some days these decisions are clear cut and there's only one choice, right? In order for you to go to work, in order for you to get paid, you're going to have to go to work, right? You don't necessarily always have to brush your teeth because not everybody's going to know that, right? But so some days these decisions are clear cut and there's only one choice to be made, right? But at other times we are faced with making a range of options, many equally valid or unsatisfactory. So therefore, by applying the principles that we're going to talk about in the next slides, hopefully that can assist us in making a better choice. Ethics are really a process of reflection. If I would have been raised in that home that I told you about earlier, but then yet when I go to my work and I see that there's an ethical conduct that we have within our work, and if my beliefs and values aren't lined up in that, all of a sudden I'm going to start thinking, or I would hope that I would start thinking, wait a minute, everybody else in this office does things this way. I was raised to do it this way. So ethics is the process of reflection. So if we're looking through the lens of the ethical lens, I would sit back and I'd say, okay, wait a minute, my beliefs and values are a little bit different in this. And then I would talk to somebody and I would try to figure out and kind of reflect on which way is best to move forward. Its aim is to challenge our thoughts and our actions. If we would only go with our own intuition, sometimes the outcome would not be it would not be best for our clients, would not be best for our coworkers, our communities, our environments, and ourselves. So we want to challenge our thoughts and actions at times. That doesn't mean that how we were raised were wrong. That doesn't mean that just means that we want to continue improving and we want to get better. Ethics then looks at how we behave and function within our society. I would hope that you would want to work with somebody that if that was me and my family, I would hope that you would want to work with me in helping me come to terms with, okay, wait, but there's another way to look at things so that we can function together so that we are more on the same page. But up until now, until we're talking about ethics, we're just all assuming that everybody thinks the way we think, everybody was raised the way we were raised, we all have the same friends, we all have the same beliefs, we all have the same values. But what we see sometimes is maybe an outcome that is different or a choice that somebody's making that we're thinking, why would they make that decision? Why would they make that choice? Why would they work with the client in that way? Or why didn't they finish this paperwork? Or why didn't they do this? Why? But when you look at it, we have all these things that are wrapped up into all of us being unique individuals. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. I know I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, but hopefully that'll give us some time. Kylie, are there any questions that anybody has for me thus far?
No questions.
Okay, I took a break to get a drink of water anyway. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and we're going to talk now about core ethical principles. So if you are a licensed professional worker, your code of ethics is going to be a little bit different than what I'm talking about today. If your organization has its own code of ethics or its own code of conduct or its own principles, know that that's wonderful. Okay, but these are the ones that are if an organization doesn't have the principles or if you don't have a professional code of ethics to follow, this is probably the most standard core ethical principles that I could find in my research. So I decided to talk about 8 of them. And so I have them listed here, but we're going to go through each one of them a little bit individually. And we're going to talk about the definitions and what some of them would look like then within your life today. So the first one, this one is beneficence. It's hard to say, but it's beneficence. And so it's a core principle. And so what we want to do is we want to look through the lens to make sure that everybody who we're working with are treated in an ethical manner, not only by respecting their decisions and protecting them from harm, but also from making efforts to secure their well-being. The term is often understood to cover acts of kindness or charity that go beyond strict obligation. So in this document that I had read, it said that it's understood in a stronger sense as an obligation. So there are 2 general rules that have been formulated as contemporary expressions and actions in that sense. So number 1 is to do no harm. When we look at to do no harm, when you're looking at your coworkers, when you're looking at people in your community, when you're looking at your clients, we want to make sure that if you're following this ethical lens that I'm talking about, is that we work in a way that is not to harm others. And then we want to also maximize those possible benefits that we have our ability to do, and then to minimize that possible harm. as we're doing that. So that would be the first one that I want to talk about. So with this one, it would be going an act of kindness. One that I think of that we do at the University of Mary all the time is that our students, within their programs, within their assignments, they have to do volunteer work, right? So what we want to do is we want to teach them that life is more about you. Life is more about just looking inward. And so that is exactly what this is saying, is that we want you to look outward a little bit, whether it's in your work, whether it's in your personal life. Um, so it's going to soup kitchens, and anything like that, that we have, something that can benefit somebody else. There is a balance though in this. So if you are a person and you read this one and then you're always so busy doing things for other people and you're not taking care of yourself, that's a different PowerPoint presentation, and that's on self-care. But this is just, we want this to be a part of your life. We don't want it to be your whole life, but we want it to be a part of your life. So doing something that benefits somebody else, and then also doing no harm as we're doing that. The next one that we want to talk about is non-maleficence, and that really means refraining from doing something that can injure somebody, can hurt or injure somebody. It's refraining from causing intentional harm toward another human being. It's the deliberate infliction of a negative act or effect on another one. So just the maleficence is it, excuse me, the maleficence is the negative act or effect on another individual or a group. So then the non in front of it means that a person generally works to a positive outcome for those that they are in contact with. It applies to a lot of our helping professions, and it has 4 key components. So an action must not be intrinsically wrong. A good effect must be intended by the action. The good outcome must not be a byproduct of a bad effect. And if there are negative outcomes of an action, the good outcomes of an action must outweigh the bad. So an example of this, I would think, would be like if you are working with people in the field and by completing an action, whether it be completing some paperwork or taking them to an area that is unsafe, anything like that, it would be an outcome that would be poor, or that might turn out bad for one of your clients. So we would want to make sure that we aren't doing that. We want to make sure that we're preventing any of those things to happen with the people that we're working with. In addition, if you look at your coworkers, so this isn't just about clients, and so we want to make sure that we're doing this within our organizations, because we want to continue creating this culture of having an ethical workplace within our environments as well. So we want to make sure that the actions that we're doing are not going to harm the people that we're working with either. The third one is respect for persons. So respect for person incorporates 2 ethical convictions. First, the individual should be treated as autonomous agents. And I put a definition in there just to help us out a little bit. So it's having the freedom to govern itself or control its own affairs. And as a social worker, you guys, I know that this can be incredibly, incredibly hard. I have tons of stories over my years of working in direct practice of how I did go through with this part, and I did allow them autonomy, but boy, it was hard to sit there and watch. So I can definitely see, and I can relate to you, and I can have empathy with that, but that really is a part of respect for persons. And second, that the person with diminished autonomy are entitled to protection. So I know that a lot of you work with people who have guardians, right? And so that can be a bit more tricky, but they are then entitled to this same type of protection. So respect is about respecting other people's wishes and supporting them in their decisions. And so I found this little clip art that I put in there, and I thought, boy, I think we can all use reminders of that like every day. So respect people's feelings, even if it does not mean anything to you, it could definitely mean everything to them. So that's a part of that engagement piece when you're working with your clients, when you're working with your coworkers, when you're working with other agencies, right? All of this can interplay. If we're using this lens, we can use it in working with a lot of different people. That's for sure. So this third one is respect. The next one is accountability. So that is an acceptance of responsibility for honest and ethical conduct towards others. Accountability is there's a lot more to it than what I have on here. And so if you are wanting to ask me questions in that and what that might look like, I would be happy to go into that a little bit more in detail. So when you accept this job, when you accept this role that you're in, you are saying that I will be accountable to doing my job, right? I will be accountable to doing what is right for the clients. It's my responsibility, no matter what somebody else is doing, no matter what our policies and procedures are, no matter what limited resources we have, all those different things that we are accepting responsibility to use that lens of ethics when we're working in the helping profession. And so really just saying, I'm going to be ethical and walk away from anything that isn't ethical. Talk to your supervisor about it. If you see something, if you hear something, all those different things. But make sure that we are being accountable for holding ethics. An example of one of the things that we talked about in one of my other presentations is that what do you do if you have a supervisor that isn't working in an ethical manner? Well, unfortunately, this is common. It happens a lot to our students. It happens a lot when I used to work, in direct practice. Sometimes we have to step away from some of those things. And even if you have seen something be unethical, that doesn't mean that you should follow and do that as well, right? We want you to be accountable for your own actions. And that's what this principle is telling us to do. The next one is fidelity. So it can be best described by keeping your words to your patients, your clients, your coworkers, the people in your lives. So stick to what you say. If you don't, then your words won't mean anything. And I know that one of the biggest challenges of this principle is your caseloads. Your email inboxes are crazy like mine. We want to say yes to things because we know we can do it. We know we want to do it. People are counting on us. And then in the end, society sometimes and life makes it a little easy to not follow through. And I can tell you, all of a sudden, people won't come to you for things, or you might have this reputation then that you are not following through. So it's actually one of the principles for ethics is that we want you to keep your word to patients. I shouldn't say I do have patients written down there, but I also mean clients and coworkers. I should have added that on there. I think that you can ask me more questions on that later as we go through. Confidentiality, I think this is one that people know of a lot more. I think with HIPAA, I can't remember the year that was established, but um, in most of your jobs, you have to hold to confidentiality, but it's an ethical duty as well. It refers to the duty to protect privileged information and to share entrusted information responsibly. It stems from the notion that a person's wishes, decisions, and personal information should be treated with respect. The duty of confidentiality can apply to individuals, organizations, and institutions. So this can be tricky. I know that almost all of you, I would imagine, on this call are familiar with a release of information. I would encourage you to stay firm in having this ethical lens on with your confidentiality. It might mean more time. It might mean that you might miss a deadline in your own mind because you don't have this form. I know it can be frustrating when you're counting on other agencies that are maybe understaffed, that are also overworked. And in this moment and in this day, you have it together, your client has it together. But then all of a sudden a release of information wasn't signed and you can't move forward and everybody has gathered, but you still don't have that piece of paper. I would highly encourage you to not move forward in that because it is an ethical responsibility that you have with your client to remain confidential. You'll have to go back and you'll have to look at your organization's policies and procedures to see what that looks like for you. Um, I know what it's like at every agency that I worked for. I know the laws and rules of HIPAA, and I know that it's really, really expensive. If a claim is filed on you with HIPAA, I think it used to start out at $10,000 per incident. And so it can be very expensive if you breach confidentiality. And in addition to that, you're going to probably lose um, rapport with the people that you're working with if you are breaking confidentiality. Um, there are times where when I was on the board of social work, people would self-report that they had a breach of confidentiality, where they faxed something to somebody and it went to the wrong organization or it went to the wrong person. They caught it. They reported that. And honestly, we were just so grateful that they were honest that at the time, what we used to do is we would just have them do a little bit more continuing education on confidentiality. And then we would just ask that they would, be more careful or whatever it may be. And so it happens by accident sometimes, but just make sure that you're the one that is accountable for standing your ground when it comes to confidentiality. Even if the people around you are a little more lax on that, you're going to want to make sure that you're one of them that stands up and says, I can't move forward with this at this time. I think sometimes we make it okay in our minds if you have a coworker that you want to share an experience that you've had that may be exciting, that may be overwhelming, that may be really challenging, and you want to share that with them. In professional ethics, what we say with that is that if you two do not share the same client, you do not share the information. It would be best if you would look to a supervisor to share those happy times, those sad times, those times that are more troubling. That way you're not breaching confidentiality when you're doing that with a supervisor. But you are breaching confidentiality if you share it to a coworker that doesn't share the same client. I hope that can be helpful for you. And then honesty. Remember what I said in the beginning that let's say in my family, I was taught a different version of what honesty is. And so, in that example, and so when the definition of honesty here, when we're talking about the principles, in one of these principles is speaking and acting truthfully. It's more than not lying, deceiving, stealing, or cheating. It entails showing respect towards others and having integrity, which is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles and a moral uprightness, and then a self-awareness. And this is where that thinking and that, just kind of looking inside and being self-aware. It's your own conscious knowledge of your own character, feelings, motives, and desires. The process can be painful, but it leads to greater self-awareness. So sometimes we think we are living our lives in the most honest way that we possibly can. But if we look back, we can think to ourselves, boy, I don't know that I really showed integrity in that instance, right? Or maybe I should have done things a little different. So just having that self-awareness about where we're at personally. And if we can all start on these stepping stones and take a look at where we are within them before we move forward, we'll all have a much better work environment, which could then be best for our clients. So honesty, integrity are absolutely essential for success in life, of all areas of life. The really good news is that anyone can develop both honesty and integrity. So if I would have been raised in a situation that I told you about with my family, and all of a sudden in my life now, I've come to just being aware that that really is not, that really just is not morally right for me to be doing those things that I was doing in my workplace, right? Or in a grocery store. And so knowing the good news is that if you're not where you want to be, that you can change. And that's what that little quote is saying, is that anyone can develop both honesty and integrity. It can maybe take some work. It can maybe take some honest reflection. and maybe even some help with people to help us through that at times. But anybody can, once this is known within you, you can definitely change, and you can become more honest, and you can have good integrity, and just that moral uprightness that we're talking about. The last one of the principles is called justice. And so simply defined as equal treatment or equal cases. And while justice usually has been used with reference to a standard of righteousness, fairness, often has been used with regard to an ability to judge without reference to one's feelings or interests. I highlighted that, and I'm going to come back to that. Fairness has also been used to refer to the ability to make judgments that are not overly general, but that are concrete and specific to a particular case. In any case, a notion of being treated as one deserves is crucial to both justice and fairness. Remember, though, that some people do need to be treated differently if they require special care over and above what other people need. And justice is about meeting everyone's needs fairly and meeting them where they are at. Let's go back to that definition about fairness often has been used with regard to an ability to judge without reference to one's feelings or interests. And so there again, taking maybe what you have been raised with, or you have learned maybe along the way, right? And then you take that to your job, and you take that to working with your clients, or you take that to working with people in your own jobs. We're going to find people that are differently than us and have different beliefs and have different values. And so what we're saying here is when we're working with people, we want to be able to work with them without references to my own feelings or my own interests, right? I can list off several instances when I was in direct practice, and now even working at the University of Mary, where I maybe didn't feel the same way as somebody, or maybe had a different interest, but I still had to meet everybody's needs in a fair manner. I'm going to talk just a little bit. I'm not going to go into much detail. So if you're like me, you think about things when people are giving presentations, and you think to yourself, you know what, that's all great. But how in the world does that apply to our crazy world that we're in, right? With the clients that we serve, with the, the different people that we work with, the different people in the communities, the different organizations, it's never black and white. It's never black and white with what we're talking about today, right? And so there are many other presentations that you guys could eventually become a part of, and they are what to do in the face of an ethical dilemma. And so an ethical dilemma is it's a type of ethical issue that arises when available choices and obligations in a specific situation do not allow for an ethical outcome. In such instances, a choice or an action is required, and all of the available alternatives violate an explicit ethical principle or guideline. I'm telling you, that is a mouthful. So to break it down, here's what it is. An ethical dilemma is when you go back up in here, you're looking at your code of ethics, and you can go one way with respect, you can go one way with confidentiality. Both ways are going to get you to a path. How do you know which way you're going to choose? Right? So an ethical dilemma is what happens if we go all the way back here, and there's a dilemma between the code of ethics and your values and beliefs and the client's values and beliefs. So when we're looking at the lens through the lens of ethics, there usually isn't a clear path for a lot of these really tough situations that people bring to the table when we talk about ethics. And so researchers have realized this, and they're like, okay, we have these great principles, right? We have these great code of ethics, but how do they apply to the real world with what we do every day? So then they created different ethical tools. And so you can You can research this within your organizations, or you can even do this yourself. If you have an ethical issue, all you have to do is go Google ethical dilemma, decision-making tools. And up will pop a ton of different research-based ethical tools that you can use. A lot of them are worksheets. A lot of them is the research that's attached to them that says this is the way to go. And what we're saying is when you have an ethical dilemma, we want to make sure that when you move forward in making that decision, that you're not just using your instinct. I want you to use your instinct, but remember, inside your instinct is all of your values, all of your beliefs, and the principles from the organization or the professional ethics that you're supposed to be following. So sometimes those different areas can get really confusing, and when they get combined, it can look really complex. And so there are many tools that help you break it down. So the first thing I just pulled one off that I thought was just the most basic one. You can define the problem and collect all of the relevant facts. You can have this sheet of paper and you can just define all of the relevant facts. You can identify all of the feasible options. Then you would assess the effect of each option on the stakeholders. Stakeholders are your organization, your clients, and yourself. And then you would establish criteria for determining the most appropriate action, and then select the best option based on the established criteria. Now, you want to do this for several different reasons. You want to do this, number one, so that it can help you find a path of which to go. The other reason you want to do this is that I always kept a copy of this in my files. When there was an ethical dilemma of which way to move forward, I would use these tools, or I would help my clients use these tools, and then it would become a part of the file. Some of the reasons I would have it in the file is because if somebody would go through and they would follow the plan that was created with these tools, and they would go and they would make a decision. You remember that autonomy that we talked about? You would have record of the work that you did with that client or with that coworker or whatever, to help say, okay, so we did meet and this is what we decided. I'm not really sure why they walked out this door and you know, took that medicine that was harmful for them or whatever it may be. And so this will help you to know that if something happens that isn't positive, that you absolutely did what you did what was in the best interest of the client. So I would highly encourage you to start using these tools. Like I said, there are so many of them out there, and they can really help you. It's just like when you're doing a math problem, sometimes math problems are really hard, and you wouldn't want to just guess on a math problem, right? If it's on a test, or if it's going to get you a difference between an F or a D or a B or an A or whatever, you're going to pull out your calculator and you're going to use your calculator to help you come up with the best end result. That is the same thing when we're talking about ethics. There definitely are dilemmas that you guys deal with, sometimes that you might realize now after this presentation. You don't have to go it alone. And if you don't want to use these tools, always talk it through with your supervisor. And that's a helpful situation as well. So who can make use of this information? There are 70 of you on here. I did not have room to put your pictures. I don't have your pictures. I don't know who you are, but who can make use of this information? Every single one of you. We know that if we all look through this lens and we can all come onto the same platform, the same page, I'm going to tell you, it's going to help you a lot. Because evidence from research suggests that a strong ethical culture, so that ethical culture is that's you and your coworkers, your supervisors, and your organizations, can provide significant benefits to an organization. It can help you with your employee job satisfaction, effective commitment, and a willingness to recommend your organization to others if you have job openings or for your clients. And then the nice thing that it can do, you guys, it can also reduce your burnout and increase intention to stay with the work that you love doing. So I would encourage all of you to dive into this a little deeper. I am open for questions. We have about 16 minutes for that. And so I'm going to go back up here and I can definitely go to any of the slides that you want to. I don't know that there are any questions. It doesn't look like there are a lot of things in the chat.
There was just kind of a statement, I guess. Recently approached a supervisor about issues and they responded in a rude manner. Our handbook states to address the issue straight on with the person. If it is completely disregarded, you are to move on and report to HR. In my work, it's hard once HR does not make any appropriate actions to correct this, while HR is also the director.
Mhm. That is hard. That is hard. So I'm going to take you back to here. That's a tough situation, right? So you did the right thing. You went and you talked to your supervisor and then you talked to HR, unless that's the same person, right? So you did that. So what I would encourage you then is to go back to accountability. Um, you still are accountable for how you treat others, whether it's a supervisor who won't take anything forward or whether it's human resources. Um, those are things that nobody can take away from you, even though that they maybe didn't handle it the way you wanted to, or the situation didn't get taken care of. There are ways that, let's say that person is licensed, anybody can file a complaint. I would hope it wouldn't get to that point, but there are, if somebody has a license, a complaint can be filed against them, and there are instructions on every state's website. But I would hope that it could be resolved before that. So I would just remind you that if you're looking through the ethical lens, you definitely did the right thing, but then you're still accountable to yourself to make sure that you're conducting yourself towards those people in that situation, in a manner that makes you proud, right? But then in the end, we go back to here. When I do career training and I do vocation training, I always talk to people about ethics, values, and beliefs. In this situation, if it happens once, and you did what you needed to do and you can go on to your job and it doesn't affect your job and it doesn't affect your clients continually, you might be able to be okay with that, right? But if it's something that continues to happen and it makes you go against your ethics, your professional ethics in a variety of ways, or if it's against your values or if it's against your belief system, you know, then you're going to have to step back and you're going to have to discern, is this an organization that you feel comfortable working in? I hope that helps. I'm not telling you to quit your job. I hope that's not the message you get. That's not what I'm saying. There are just different steps that people might need to take, because in the end, you are responsible for your own ethics, and that's that accountability piece. I tell licensed social workers all the time, your agency and your organization, it's not their responsibility that you follow your code of ethics. As a licensee, that is your responsibility because it's your license. So that would be the same thing then, whether you hold a license or not. Any other comments or questions?
There's a follow-up question to that. Who would the
Okay.
person file that with if the HR director won't listen or act?
So I'm not sure if this person is licensed or not. But I would still, even if it's the HR person and they haven't taken steps, to resolve whatever it was that was going on, um, I would think that everybody has a boss, even a human resources. I would go back to that person. I don't know the situation, but if somebody gives me a response that I'm not quite satisfied with, I sit on it a little bit, I think about it, and then I might even go back for a second attempt. That's just my personal way of doing things. And I'll say, okay, I've been thinking about this again, and how you resolve this just still isn't setting well with me. And so I want to talk about this. I want to see if we can come up a plan to get it resolved, because if it isn't, I feel so strongly about it that I'm going to have to go further and share this with the next level person.
Um, let's see. This one's kind of a long one. We have a coworker who believes that we should not give disabled people deductions for the expense of an ESA from their income. I am fighting this as I believe that a disability is a disability regardless of whether it is physical or mental or emotional. How do I get across that ethically? It is our responsibility to do all we can for them. HUD does not have a specific rule on this, so it is a gray area. And these people are struggling and rely on their ESA. Many are very lonely and their ESA keeps them going. Am I not being ethically correct because I am fighting it?
No, I wouldn't say that that person isn't being ethically correct. I think that it goes back to this aspect of justice, if I'm understanding her correctly. But I would definitely have to look at the policy, the procedures, um, and I would see if there is a code of conduct or if there is a policy. I always tell students that one of the hardest parts of my job ever in direct practice was resources, ethics surrounding resources, because there were never enough resources to cover all the needs that our clients had. And so when that became an issue, I would always have to go back to the policy within the organization. And so I guess I would need a little bit more information on that. So I can, an example of like when I worked for the state, if people, I worked in a crisis unit. So when people would come in and it was a cold, stormy night, we only had 3 vouchers for a hotel. If 5 people came in, this code of ethics for justice really gets hard, right? How do I meet everyone's needs fairly? So that was a task, that was a responsibility, that was just overwhelming, right? But to do that ethically, then what I did is what we did is we would take those 5 clients, and then we would fall back on the state's policy as to who gets those vouchers. And so then there was a and I this is not the right term, but there was an order. There was like a pecking order of who got that first, right? So I would make sure that I would follow that. First people to get that is if somebody came in that crisis situation and they were pregnant and they were using, right? So that would be the first one. And then it went to children and families. And then it went to, there was a pecking order for that. That's such the wrong word, but there was an order for that. So then that is how I followed it, to make sure that everyone's needs were taken care of as fairly as I could with the limited resources we have. Now, if there were only 3 vouchers and there were 5 people, that meant that I still had 2 people who were just as deserving, right, to get this need. So then what I would do is I would hook them up with a homeless case manager, and we would make sure they had a tent. We would make sure they had blankets. We would make sure they had food. We would make sure they had clothing, right? And then we would go check on them the next morning to make sure that they made it through the night okay. So I was filling the need differently, but I was doing what was in the best interest and with the resources that I had. I'm not sure what the exact policies look like or anything, but so I hope that's helpful. I think we have a few more minutes.
You summarize this in the best way. Confront a situation in a way that you can go home at night knowing you did the right thing and reacted accordingly to your values.
Mhm.
So this is a follow-up to that first one about approaching the supervisor about issues in a rude manner.
Mhm.
This gal stated, "It has led me to use my PTO to gather my information. I am professionally going to leave the organization due to burnout and being unheard. She was aware we spoke face to face. I demoted myself due to this. I experienced compassion fatigue for the first time in my life. I brought all this to the HR/director, and she is aware I am an asset to the nonprofit organization."
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear of your experience. And it just leads to the research that's done that if you can work in an organization that has a strong ethical culture, a lot of these things can fall to the wayside. And then we can just have healthier employees so that we can help more people and we can provide resources that our clients and our community needs. So that does follow the research.
This one's a follow-up to the ESA one. I already approached my boss about it. He has not made a decision, so I contacted Joel Mansky, who contacted HUD in Denver, and no one seems to have an answer. It is stressing me out.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. I can imagine. And sometimes when we have to do something to make policy change, it moves slow. It moves slow, but while it's moving slow, do the best you can and document what you need to, and find additional resources for those people if you can. The networking is so important.
Are there any other questions or comments? I said, thank you for this. We need another one on this topic.
Maybe we can dive a little bit into some case studies and some ethical dilemma tools, right? Okay, thank you so
Right.
much for everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Yes, thank you, Heidi,
You're welcome.
for
Bye-bye.
presenting again. For those of you that are still on, please take a few minutes to do the survey that will be emailed to you regarding our presentation. And lastly, we will not have a presentation next week. So our next one is November 14th on the HUD-VASH program. So hope to see you all in a couple weeks.